Okay, so after painting your miniatures, it's basing. Basing really gives it that pop when when it's on the battlefield, when it's on the game board. It really just blends in with the background as well. So with the Joan of Arc miniatures, they are small. Obviously, some people have glued their miniatures into the bases of the three bases to make a unit up. I've opted not to, mainly for storage solution. That's my personal preference. So I'm basing the individual miniatures, whereas you could stick them obviously into a base, a three-person base. Then you can prime them, paint them, and then you can base it all together, which will look pretty seamless. So just to go through my process of what I do in terms of basing my Joan of Arc miniatures, I go through effectively 3 phases is the best way to think of it. The first phase is when you've got them just normal primed, effectively the bases, whatever it might be. These have got some dark color contrast in it. You put a texture paint on. So I'm using Citadel's Agrellan Badlands, and what this does is it's kind of got like the sand, the PVA, the pigment paint all in one, so it's all in there together. Once you've done that, it looks a bit like this. Okay, so you can see you got some texture there. I think it looks really good towards like mud. It looks like mud. Then it's going in with Agrax Earthshade and give it a wash. So you end up with a base looking like this. So it gives it, again, more of a wash. Then you come in with your PVA and you get some grass flock. I've got a few little stones and bits and bobs in there as well, just to mix it up with the contrast. And then you just place that onto the top of that. So that's the 3 stages I'll be going through today. Now, obviously, it's quite useful to just do this in a batch. That's probably what I recommend. The only issue with this one is it's got no prime at all. The texture paint doesn't work very well if it's not attaching to some primer. You do have to make sure you've got a primer first. But obviously, if you spray primed your miniatures, they're going to have that anyway. So that shouldn't be a problem. Don't worry about them being white. That will change, obviously, once you've painted it on. So, I basically use this brush for all PVA and basing. So remember, this texture paint does have PVA in it, so you don't want to be using a decent brush on it. But you can just wash your brush afterwards, and like this one, it's not phenomenal, but it's good enough. So you'll notice I've used a fair amount of this already, but if I just get a bit of it up onto the top, you'll see what I'm talking about. So this is the texture we're talking about. Okay, so it's kind of got a bit of the sand in there. It's got the pigment. It's got the PVA. It still suffers from the same problems that we have with the paint pots. What you're basically going to want to do is you're going to be just painting this on. Okay. Now, don't worry about getting it on the boots. Obviously, a bit of mud on the boots is not a big problem. You don't want it to be pristine anyway. And be kind of liberal, but change up as you go around the base. You want some bits with a fair amount of the texture on there, and you want some without, just to shine through that flock. Okay, so that's what you're basically looking for. And then, because I'm doing these in batches, I'm probably going to just put those aside. I'm just going to start laying them out here, okay? Okay, so now we're going to go through this batch with the texture paint. So, as I mentioned in the first model, don't worry about getting over the boots. That just adds to the realism. With the flying demons there, I was a bit more careful, and it's really important to have a bit of a range of texture. So apply more on some and not so much on others. More of the sand from the texture paint compared to others. But the PVA helps to keep it quite moist, so you don't add water to it. You should just be able to use it straight out of the pot. So as you can see, I've sped this up 8 times to real time,
and it is a quick process. We're talking about just going over the base, and this is going to give you, it's a foundation. You could just leave it at phase 2, you'll see in a bit when I add the wash, because that would be great for just some kind of dirt. If you just wanted it to show mud, you didn't want grass on there, you can use tufts. I wouldn't use tufts at this scale because they're just too big. It looks like massive blades of grass. But certainly the static grass looks fine. It still looks like obviously quite long grass, but it looks absolutely fine. So yeah, we've got quite a few miniatures here to base. I still have a few more to do as well. But what you hopefully be able to see with this video is how quick, again, it's all, for me, with the queue of painting I've got, it's about speed. Getting a decent finish, perhaps not the best ever, but decent finish with minimal speed. With maximum speed, sorry. So phase 2 is the wash. We're using Agrax Earthshade, an absolute essential wash, in my opinion, for any painting technique. And you basically just go quite liberal, and you just chuck it on, okay? So don't be afraid to get it. And again, this just gives more contrast to that texture now, and it makes those bits of grains and stuff pop out. Now, obviously, you can only put this wash on once the texture paint has dried. So these few miniatures that I'm doing at the moment, they were effectively already had the texture paint dried on them. So that was just showing a phase 2. I will actually go on to the bulk of the miniatures a bit later in this video to finish off with the phase 2 and 3 on there. So these ones that I'm putting over to the side, they've actually been washed as well. So I'm just showing you here what it should look like. Okay, so now we're going on PVA and then flock. I've said flock. I don't really use flock. I use static grass mixed in with some bits of stone and bits of wood and bits of texture stuff. So again, make sure you thin down the PVA glue a little bit, not mad, a little bit, just to make it flow easily onto the base. And then I literally paint it on. I know you can get applicators like those little spatulas that Games Workshop do and other companies, but I just use an oldish brush and it works absolutely fine. Put the PVA on the base, not all of the base. Try and leave a few gaps, and then literally just place it into the tub like you saw. Give it a little movement around of it. Tap off any excess grass, and then you're pretty much done. So now we come back to the main bulk of the miniatures, and the texture paint's dried. It took about an hour. I've left it to dry, and you kind of see it crack a little bit as well. It has a few cracks in it, and certainly has that look. So now we're going in with the wash, the Agrax Earthshade again, and we're just pasting that onto all of the miniatures. Now the Flying Demons, I don't actually add the grass texture to it, so that's an example of just leaving it with the texture paint with the wash on it. So again, it's a really, really fast process. This phase is literally just painting on the wash onto a flat base. And again, if you get it over the shoes, it's not a massive problem, because again, it just adds that dirt realism. So you can see there in the background as they keep popping up, miniature after miniature after miniature, 8 times speeded up from real time here. So not a huge amount of time taken to do this. So coming to the last few now. So these are the Crossbowmen. I had quite a few of those to base. They were probably the most difficult to base because of the nature of the shield and trying to get in between the shield and the feet and so forth. And then the angels were the last ones. So I've got a couple of angels I'm doing there. And you see here I'm plastering on. Right, so phase 3 is the PVA, and I've said flock there again, it's static grass. Now, as you can see here, I'm literally just shaking it into the tub. I'm not a little bit excited there, but again, just tap it off and then just knock any grass off onto the back into the pot. Just be a little bit careful with static grass because it is effectively very small, fine plastic. So I always make sure I tidy up and clean up afterwards to make sure I pick up any of that static grass. I don't want that getting into on my hands or onto lungs. So making sure you're washing your hands thoroughly. I go with a wet kitchen roll and just go over any work surfaces I've used it on, just to pick up any of it. Just because I think it's great to have tiny bits of plastic flown around, and it's very light. So here we go, literally just doing all of the miniatures. Again, it really doesn't take long at all. I've just used a bit of offhand plastic and just put the PVA glue on it. Slightly watered down, like I said, so just keep adding a little bit of water to it. Keep it a little bit thin so it's easy to apply. And don't apply it to the entire base. I think that's the key, is especially as you've spent all the time putting the texture paint on, it's pointless if you cover it completely with the grass. So, you know, majority of it, you'll see it as a grass base, but I want some of that texture mud coming through as well. And you are going to see that texture come through the grass as well, especially when you look up close. So it's really nice to see it. And you can see them on the right there. They're slowly coming together, and finally the two angels. And that's it. So just a little freeze frame of coming up. This is a video shot of just going over those miniatures. So that's all of those miniatures based from start. And here you can see I've done the other angel in terms of its basing texture, but you can see the texture paint coming through from the grass.